Have you ever been in an open relationship? My name is Andrew Mercer, and I had to live through that nightmare. They say some conversations split your life in two, what came before, and everything after. Mine started on a Tuesday. Ordinary enough. The smell of her eucalyptus lotion still lingered in the bathroom. The hum of the ceiling fan above our bed felt louder than usual. And there she stood, Cynthia, framed in the bedroom mirror, applying lipstick with the kind of casual care you'd expect from someone deciding on a wine, not detonating a marriage. She didn't look at me at first. Just stared at her own reflection, eyes sharp, mouth steady. "We need to try something new," she said. I thought maybe she meant therapy. A vacation. Even one of those couples workshops where people yell into pillows and talk about their childhood. But no. An open relationship, she continued, capping the lipstick with a soft click. It might save us. Have you ever had your heart crack without making a sound? That was the moment for me. I didn't speak. I couldn't, not right away. I watched her turn slightly, catching my reflection over her shoulder. She looked almost curious, like she was studying a painting, waiting to see what the image would do next. I nodded. A single, slow nod. Not because I agreed, but because if I opened my mouth right then, I didn't know what might come out. And that terrified me. The room felt colder. Not like the windows were open, but like something inside me had stepped back. Like part of me refused to stay present for this. She moved past me, brushing her shoulder against mine lightly. I didn't flinch. I just stood there, watching her. "You're quiet," she said, not quite smiling. "That's not like you." "What do you want me to say?" I asked. "I don't know. Something honest." So I gave her silence. It was the only honest thing I had left in that moment. "You know the worst part?" She said it like a solution. Like we were just adding spice to a recipe. Not gambling everything we'd built on some fragile idea of freedom. I remember the way the light hit her hair as she walked into the hallway. She looked radiant. Effortlessly calm. Like the choice had already been made weeks ago, and this was just the unveiling. But me. I felt like a man watching the first crack appear on a dam. I wanted to scream. To beg her to stop, to fight for us the way we used to. But some instinct, something old and buried, told me that showing pain now would only feed something dangerous. So I buried it. Fast and deep. "I'm just trying to be real with you," she said from the kitchen, already clinking plates like nothing had changed. "We've both been coasting. I thought you'd appreciate the honesty." I joined her there, slow and measured. Reached into the cupboard for a mug I didn't want. Just something to hold on to. Something normal. "I do appreciate honesty," I said. "But let's not pretend this is mutual." She looked at me then. Really looked. "You think I don't see you?" she asked. "Wearing that mask. Going through the motions. We haven't touched each other in months. We're roommates with rings." I could have told her that roommates don't wait up till 2 a.m. just to make sure the other person gets home safe. That they don't memorize each other's laugh breaks in reruns of The Office, or still know what kind of tea you'll want on a hard day. But maybe she was right. Maybe we had already turned into ghosts. I just hadn't noticed how far I'd drifted. Or maybe I had, and chose not to see it. "You still love me?" I asked, not as a challenge, but like a man pressing on a bruise, testing the pain. She didn't answer. Just sipped her coffee, and said, "Let's just try it. See how it feels." The audacity of the word "try" lit a fire in my chest. Like this was a recipe we were tweaking. A science project. But I didn't erupt. That would have been too easy for her to dismiss. Instead, I nodded again. Same pace. Same lie. Inside, I was breaking in quiet ways. And here's the thing, when someone suggests freedom, but checks to see if you're still waiting, that's not freedom. That's control. So I let her think she had it. Let her mistake my silence for agreement. Because sometimes, the most powerful answer you can give is the one you never say out loud. The next evening, I found myself driving west, far beyond where the traffic hums and the sidewalks still carry bits of rush hour tension. I needed stillness. Something neutral. Something that didn't smell like her perfume or echo with that line, "An open relationship might save us." When I pulled into Matthew's driveway, the porch light was already glowing like it had been waiting for me. It had been years. Maybe a decade since college. But when I texted him, "You around tonight?" he replied in 2 words that didn't ask why, always are. Matthew had aged into that rare kind of quiet that comes from either deep wisdom or deep weariness. His hair was longer now, graying in streaks that somehow made him look steadier. He opened the screen door barefoot, holding 2 lowball glasses already half full. "Still take it neat?" he asked. I nodded. He handed me the glass and gestured to the porch swing. The air smelled like dry leaves and wood smoke. Some jazz record hummed faintly from inside, muffled, distant, perfect. We sat in silence for a bit. Not awkward, just space. Room to breathe. Eventually, he spoke. She said it like a solution, didn't she? I turned my head slowly toward him. How'd you know? That's the thing about people who are trying to outrun their own emptiness, he said, sipping. They dress it up like clarity. Like they've just figured it all out and you're the one behind. He glanced at me sideways. But it never starts with the new rules. It starts with a lie. Usually to themselves. I took a long sip, feeling the bourbon burn down through the center of me. I'm not angry yet, I said. Not the way I probably should be. He nodded, slow. That comes later. After the shock wears off. Right now, you're just circling the wreckage. The leaves swirled across the yard in gusts, dry and rust-colored. It was the kind of wind that hinted winter was thinking about arriving early. You think pain ever goes away? I asked, mostly to the dark. Matthew smiled, not mockingly, just tired. Pain's just attachment to a version of life that never existed the way we imagined. That one hit me. Because he wasn't saying the love wasn't real. He was saying the picture I'd been holding, of her, of us, had always been a little blurry. A little dishonest. She used to laugh in her sleep, I said suddenly, surprising myself. I'd wake up just to listen. Matthew didn't say anything. Just let the silence hold the weight of that memory. We sat there until the bourbon ran dry and the cold finally started sinking into my bones. Eventually, he turned toward me again, not quite smiling. You're not broken, man. You're just waking up. Feels violent, I know. But waking up always does. I nodded slowly, unsure if I agreed or just wanted to. The porch creaked as we stood. Come back anytime, he said. I was halfway to the car when he added, one more thing. I turned. Don't try to prove you're okay. Just be where you are. It's enough. I drove home with the windows cracked, letting the wind steal some of the noise from inside my chest. At a red light, I glanced at my reflection in the rear view. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't quite recognize the man looking back at me. Some days, she came home glowing, her heels clicking with rhythm, eyes lit like someone who'd just stepped off a movie set. Other days, she'd move through the house like fog. No sound. No trace. Just presence. I stopped asking where she'd been. That wasn't part of the rules anymore. Cynthia had started dating. Casually, she said. A word that made everything feel like a shrug. I remember one night, I was washing dishes, sleeves rolled up, hands buried in suds, when I heard her laugh from the other room. Not a soft chuckle, but the full-bodied kind. I peeked around the corner. She was curled up on the couch, texting. Her smile lit up the phone like it had whispered something only for her. Then she looked up. You still love me, right? She asked, like it was a weather check. I dried my hands slowly. Do you want me to? She tilted her head, eyes narrowing just enough to catch the edge of confusion. Or guilt. Or maybe just performance. I like knowing, she said. That's all. Then her phone buzzed again, and she was back in that private world of emojis and flirty replies and whatever version of herself she was trying on now. I went to the garage that night and found my old sketchpad. It was wedged behind a toolbox, covered in dust and cobwebs like a part of me I'd sealed off. I hadn't drawn in years. I used to sketch on everything, napkins, margins of notebooks, receipts. But somewhere along the way, between deadlines and lawn care and trying to hold a fraying marriage together, the pencil got quiet. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, a mug of black coffee next to me, and just started sketching. Nothing profound. Just lines. Curves. Shadows. The side of a lamp. The curl of a leaf. Her shoes by the door, still wet from rain. And as I drew, something strange happened. The silence didn't feel as cruel. It didn't mean nothing was happening. It just meant something real was finally beginning, in me. The next day, I came home and found her in the hallway, holding a dress up to her chest in front of the mirror. She didn't hear me come in. She turned quickly, startled, and smiled in that reflexive way, half genuine, half apology. You're home early. I live here, I said quietly. Her smile faltered. Big night? I asked. She shrugged. Just seeing someone new. It's not serious. Then her voice dipped, softer, more uncertain. You're okay with that, right? I should have said I wasn't. That it hurt. That I couldn't keep doing this strange, silent dance. But instead, I nodded once and said, sure. Because the truth was, I didn't know how I felt anymore. I just knew I didn't want to be the man waiting for a woman to make up her mind. Later that night, she came into the living room and sat across from me. "You've been drawing again," she said, noticing the pad in my lap. "Yeah." She watched me for a long moment. "You used to say it made you feel like yourself." I looked up. Met her gaze. "It still does." She didn't reply. Just nodded once and left the room, her perfume lingering behind her like a half-closed door. And in that quiet, I kept sketching. Not her. Not us. Just me. I'd forgotten what it felt like to be noticed, really noticed. It happened on a Thursday, late afternoon. The kind of cloudy day that makes everything feel like it's waiting for something. I was sitting alone at a cafe off Hawthorne, pencil in hand, sketching the curve of a sugar jar. It wasn't art, not really. Just motion. Something to keep my mind from drifting into the parts of my life that felt less like mine with each passing week. She approached quietly. Mid-30s, maybe. Wavy chestnut hair, sleeves rolled to her elbows. She carried a second coffee and paused at my table like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I didn't mean to stare," she said, setting the cup down near me. "But you draw like you're trying to remember something." I looked up, startled. "What makes you say that?" She smiled, warm but not intrusive. "My dad used to sketch old buildings from memory. Said it was like collecting things he didn't want to forget." I offered a polite nod and motioned to the chair across from me. "You're welcome to sit, if you don't mind terrible shading." She laughed, genuine, unguarded, and took the seat without hesitation. "I'm Claire," she said. "Andrew." She sipped her drink and glanced down at my sketchbook. "You're better than you think." I smiled at that, maybe the first real smile in weeks. Not the tight, polite one I gave Cynthia. Not the hollow one I wore at work. We talked. About nothing, at first. Weather. Coffee. Her job as a sign language interpreter. My former life in ad design. No flirting. No tension. Just presence. At some point, I forgot to check the time. She noticed the pencil I'd tucked behind my ear. "You have ink on your fingers," she said, gently. I looked down. Smudged graphite across my knuckles, like I'd been trying to claw something out of the page. "Part of the charm," I muttered. Claire leaned back, watching me with a softness I hadn't felt in a long time, not admiration, not desire. Just witnessing. Like she saw a man trying to hold himself together quietly and decided not to interrupt. She didn't ask if I was married. And I didn't mention Cynthia. Not out of guilt. But because for the first time in months, the story wasn't about her. When she left, she didn't ask for my number. Just smiled and said, "Maybe I'll see you here again." I watched her go, the doorbell chiming behind her, and I sat there for another hour, sketching the curve of a hand I'd only glimpsed in passing. That night, back home, Cynthia was already in bed. Her phone glowed in her hand, fingers flying across the screen. She didn't look up when I entered. Didn't ask where I'd been. And for once, I didn't care. Because all I could think about was the sound of a stranger's voice, and how it made me feel more like myself than anything Cynthia had said in months. She burst through the front door like she was chasing a feeling, her laughter loud, breathless, echoing down the hallway. I was in the kitchen, rinsing out a coffee mug, and for a moment, I didn't move. I just stood there, letting the sound of her happiness pass over me like wine through a broken window. "Andrew," she called out, kicking her heels into the corner like a teenager sneaking past curfew. "You will not believe the night I had." She came into the kitchen with flushed cheeks and a perfume I didn't recognize. Her eyes were bright, lips parted, phone still lit up in her hand from whatever joke or compliment she hadn't quite finished savoring. I gave her a nod. Nothing more. "Oh, come on," she said, grinning. "You could at least pretend to be curious." "I'm glad you had fun," I said flatly, drying the inside of the mug a little too slowly. That smile of hers tightened. "Just a hair." "Seriously." I placed the cup on the rack and turned, leaning against the counter. "What do you want from me, Cynthia?" Applause. She rolled her eyes, walking past me toward the living room, peeling off her earrings as she went. "No. I just want to feel like you still care." "About what?" I asked, my voice quieter now. "Where you go. Who you're with." She spun to face me, frustration surfacing fast. "You're acting like this doesn't bother you. Like you don't care about anything anymore." I walked toward the hallway, calm. Detached. "Maybe I'm just tired." "Of me," she snapped. I stopped. Turned back. "Of pretending this version of us still makes sense." That was the first real silence we'd shared in weeks. She blinked, her expression cracking, just slightly. "So that's it?" "No," I said, brushing past her. "That's this." I grabbed the throw blanket from the couch and walked into the den, pulling the door shut behind me. The quiet that followed wasn't angry. It wasn't bitter. It was empty. I laid on the couch, arms folded behind my head, staring at the ceiling like it owed me an answer. And that's when I noticed it, this strange, sharp relief spreading through my chest. For the first time, Cynthia wasn't the center of the storm inside me. She was just noise outside the window. It didn't feel like winning. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like freedom. Small, quiet, unfamiliar freedom. She didn't knock. She didn't come in. And I didn't want her to. I never thought I'd be the kind of man who showed up early to therapy. But there I was, second session in, sitting in the lobby 10 minutes before my appointment, staring at a framed abstract painting on the wall that I couldn't make sense of. It looked like a storm, color without shape, edges that led nowhere. Kind of like my life lately. The therapist's name was Jordan. Mid-40s. Quiet voice, warm eyes. He had a way of leaning back in his chair like he was making space for my words to fall somewhere safe. In our first session, I talked around things. Made jokes. Danced on the surface like someone skipping stones. But today, something felt different. The walls inside me weren't holding the way they used to. So, Jordan said, after the usual polite beginning, "How have things been since we last spoke?" I exhaled slowly, eyes on the floor. "I think I'm starting to disappear." He didn't flinch. Just waited. Not in a tragic way, I added quickly. Just, quietly. Like a light fading in a room no one visits anymore. Jordan tilted his head slightly. "Tell me what that looks like." I looked at my hands. "It looks like agreeing to things I don't believe in. Like nodding during conversations I should interrupt. Like watching the woman I married become someone I wouldn't recognize at a dinner party, and still asking her if she needs anything from the store." There was a long pause. "And why do you think you keep doing that?" I swallowed. "Because I've been trained to. Since I was a kid." Jordan leaned forward a bit. "Say more." I looked past him, out the window. The trees were bare now, branches thin and brittle against the sky. "My father had this way of making everything about him," I said, voice lower now. "If I upset him, even by accident, it turned into a storm. Doors slamming, voices raised, days of silence. So I learned fast. Keep him calm. Be useful. Don't have needs." I shifted in my seat. And when I met Cynthia, I thought I'd finally escaped that. But looking back, maybe I just found a more elegant version of the same thing. Jordan let that breathe. Then he said something simple that cracked me open. "It sounds like your nervous system only knows how to feel safe when someone else is satisfied." I didn't speak. My jaw tensed. I felt that one all the way in my spine. "You're not here to replace her," Jordan added gently. "You're here to reclaim you." That line, reclaim you, echoed louder than anything Cynthia had said in months. I walked out of that office feeling like someone had nudged my soul an inch back into alignment. Not a leap. Not a transformation. Just a nudge. But sometimes that's enough. That weekend, I didn't answer her texts right away. I didn't ask about her plans. I didn't offer to fix the lamp in the hallway or remind her to grab more oat milk on her way home. Instead, I picked up groceries I liked. Cooked for myself. Drew for hours without checking the time. I even cleaned the garage, blasting old Springsteen records like I was 20 again, before I ever knew what heartbreak in a marriage felt like. Cynthia came home Saturday night around 9. She stood in the doorway, surprised by the smell of garlic and lemon in the air. "You cooked?" she asked, setting her purse down. "For me," I said. She stared at me for a second, like something was off. "What did you make?" "Pasta. You can have some if you want, but I wasn't waiting on you." I didn't say it cruelly. Just clearly. Cleanly. She stood there, unsure. Like a guest in her own house. "Are you mad at me?" she asked finally. "No," I said. "I'm just starting to act like I matter, too." And I meant it. She didn't reply. Just wandered down the hall, probably expecting a follow-up. A question. A peace offering. But none came. Because I was done filling a role that cost me myself. This wasn't revenge. This was a quiet rebellion. And it had already begun. It started with a ping. Then another. By the third vibration, I didn't even bother checking the screen. Cynthia had started texting me late at night again, usually after 2 glasses of wine and a few too many hours chasing validation from strangers. The messages always landed somewhere between nostalgic and cruel. "Miss your arms around me. Tonight felt exciting, but empty. Do you ever think about the first time we kissed?" I read them. I let them sit on the screen for a moment, like stray embers flickering at the edge of a dying fire. Then I deleted them. Not out of spite. Not because I wanted to win. But because those words weren't for me. They were for a version of me she hoped still existed. The one who used to drop everything at the first sign of her needing reassurance. The one who would have read between the lines, who would have taken her ambiguity as a thread to pull on, unraveling the knot between us one more time. But I wasn't that man anymore. I didn't need to be. I turned off the screen and sat back in the chair by the window. My mug of tea was still warm. A Miles Davis record crackled softly in the background. The air smelled like sage. I'd lit one of those old cleansing sticks Claire had mentioned, just to see what the fuss was about. It worked, in a way. Not magically. Just enough to make the space feel like mine. I closed my eyes and listened, to the music, to the wind against the glass, to the silence that now lived between Cynthia and me like a polite tenant. She still came home most nights. Still dropped her heels by the front door. Still muttered a casual hey like we were just housemates in passing. But the dynamic had changed. She could feel it, too. The night she tried to crawl into bed beside me again, I didn't stop her. But I didn't move closer, either. She sighed. A long, pointed exhale. You're colder than you used to be. I stared at the ceiling. I'm not colder, I said. I'm clearer. She turned over, her back to me. I didn't chase her. Didn't reach for her hand in the dark like I used to. Because I finally understood something. Longing is not the same as love. And guilt, when disguised as affection, is a manipulation. The next morning, she was already gone when I woke up. Just a cold dent in the sheets where she'd been. A note on the counter said, going to yoga. Maybe dinner later. I didn't reply. Instead, I walked out into the backyard with my sketchbook and a folding chair, letting the sun fall across my face like a blessing I hadn't earned but was ready to receive. I sketched until the light shifted. I meditated for 10 minutes, longer than I ever had. And for once, I didn't check the clock. Or the phone. Or the silence. Because none of it hurt anymore. It was just stillness. And in that stillness, I felt the faint outline of peace beginning to trace itself along the edges of my life. It was close to midnight when I heard the door open, too loud, like her hands weren't cooperating. Keys hit the floor, followed by a soft thud as her bag slid down the wall. Then nothing. I stayed seated on the living room couch, sketchbook resting on my lap, pencil unmoving. A few seconds passed before I heard her footsteps, uneven, careful. And then she appeared in the doorway. Mascara smudged. Hair undone. Her blouse wrinkled and hanging off one shoulder. And her eyes, red-rimmed and glassy, searching the room like she'd forgotten how it used to feel. She started, but her voice cracked and fell apart. She pressed a hand to her face and let out a shaky breath. I don't know where I am anymore. I said nothing. Not yet. She moved slowly toward the armchair across from me and sank into it like someone who'd been walking in circles for days. I thought this would make me feel free, she whispered. I thought if I pushed the limits, chased something new, something thrilling, I'd find me again. Her voice was raw now, closer to the woman I used to know, the one who'd once cried at a dog food commercial because the music was too beautiful. But all I found was noise, she said. And strangers who look right through me. She buried her face in her hands. I got lost, Andrew. I looked at her for a long time. Not because I didn't believe her. But because I needed to decide who she was now, this version of her, sitting broken in the chair where she once laughed about breakfast crumbs. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady. Low. I don't think you got lost, I said. I think you left. She looked up slowly, the weight of those words settling into her spine. I wanted to feel something again, she said, voice small. Anything. And did you? I asked. Her silence was answer enough. She reached toward the coffee table, maybe for a tissue, maybe for a connection. But I stayed where I was, hands folded in my lap. I want things back, she whispered. Back the way they were. Before all this. I stared at her, really stared, and in that moment, I realized something that stopped me cold. There was no before anymore. What we had wasn't waiting around the bend. It wasn't a house we could return to. It was ash. And no amount of guilt, or tears, or apologies could rebuild it exactly the same. CYN, I said gently, what we had, it's not where we are anymore. She closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. So what are we now? I didn't answer right away. Because the truth? I didn't know yet. But I knew what we weren't. And that was the beginning of something honest. The next morning, the kitchen smelled like eggs and toast. I walked in to find her humming, gently, deliberately, standing at the stove like it was 2017 and everything was still intact. She moved like she was trying to choreograph nostalgia, her robe cinched tight, hair pinned up, coffee already poured into 2 mugs. Made breakfast, she said, not looking at me. I sat at the table, watching her hand slice into an avocado. They didn't shake. They were rehearsed. Too smooth. She placed the plate in front of me with a kind of hesitant hope, then took the seat across like it was all perfectly normal. "So," she began, "I was thinking maybe we could do something this weekend. That place you used to like, the cabin in Ridgeview." I sipped my coffee. "You think that's still ours?" I asked quietly. The question hung in the air longer than the smell of butter on toast. She blinked. "It could be. If we try." I looked out the window. A crow landed on the fence, cocked its head, and flew off again. That felt more honest than anything happening in the room. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't hurl accusations. I just didn't reach back. Because I'd spent so long pulling threads, hoping one of them would bring her closer. And now, with her suddenly threading the needle in reverse, I realized I no longer needed the old fabric. "I'm not angry," I said. "And I'm not punishing you. But I'm not pretending either." She set her fork down a little harder than necessary. "You're punishing me with peace." That almost made me smile. "No," I said calmly. "I've just stopped chasing chaos." Her eyes scanned my face, trying to find the man who used to plead, who used to over-explain, who used to throw himself into the flames just to keep the cold out of the room. But I wasn't that man anymore. And it rattled her. "What happened to you?" she asked, quieter now. I held her gaze. I started listening to the part of me that stopped speaking years ago. That silence returned, the same one that had haunted our living room after her first confession. But this time, it wasn't sharp. It was just true. She looked down at her plate. "So what? We just sit here. Let everything rot between us while you act like the Dalai Lama." I stood slowly, folding my napkin. "You came home looking for a man who used to wait for you. But I'm not waiting anymore." Her breathing picked up. That frustration, the kind born not of rejection but of irrelevance, began to show. "I said I wanted to fix it," she snapped. "Doesn't that matter?" "It would have," I said, "before you broke it and blamed me for asking questions." She didn't speak after that. Just sat there, eyes glistening, fingers tracing the edge of her plate. And I walked down the hallway, the sound of my steps soft but certain. She'd wanted me to feel the loss. Now, she finally did. The day I filed the papers, it was raining. Not the dramatic kind. No lightning, no thunderclaps, just a slow, gray drizzle that blurred the edges of the courthouse parking lot. Fitting, I remember thinking. Like the world had the decency not to turn this into a movie. The clerk didn't ask questions. Just pointed me toward the line, then slid the manila envelope back across the counter with the date stamped on the front. I held it in my hands all the way home, resting it gently in the passenger seat like it was something fragile. Or sacred. Back at the house, the jazz was already playing, Coltrane, soft and warm. I poured myself a coffee. No shaking hands. No racing heart. Just peace. Clean, quiet, unremarkable peace. And it scared me a little, how easy it felt. I left the envelope on the kitchen counter. No theatrics. No scribbled note to soften the blow. Just the facts, tucked neatly behind a signature she'd never expected me to write. When Cynthia came home that evening, she moved like it was any other Tuesday. She walked through the door, pulled her scarf off, muttered something about traffic, then spotted it. She stopped mid-step. The color drained from her face almost instantly. She didn't touch it. Not yet. Her voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. "What is this?" I stayed seated on the couch, arms resting calmly on my knees. "You know what it is." She stepped closer, slowly, like she was approaching a flame she wasn't sure was real. Her fingers trembled as she opened it, her eyes darting across the words, legal terms, dates, the dividing of everything once called ours. "You actually filed." I nodded once. No anger. Just confirmation. Tears welled fast. "You said we could fix this." "No," I said, voice steady. "You said that. After everything. After choosing distance, and distraction, and calling it freedom. You wanted me to wait in the ruins while you looked for yourself." She stumbled back a step, the envelope hanging in one hand. "I didn't know you'd give up." "I didn't give up," I said, standing now. "I let go." She blinked, eyes wild now, mouth open as if to speak, but no words came. The fight in her had nowhere left to land. I walked to the door and opened it. Not harshly. Just wide enough for the night air to creep in. She looked at me like I'd pulled the floor out from beneath her. "You're serious," she said. "You're really doing this?" I nodded. "I gave you everything," she whispered. I didn't flinch. "You gave me conditions." Her breath hitched. I didn't rush her. Just waited. She stood frozen in the doorway for a long time, like a child realizing a game has gone too far. Her mascara had smudged. Her shoulders sagged. She looked like someone finally hearing a silence they couldn't control. And then she stepped out. Not with defiance. Not with rage. Just disbelief. I followed behind her and gently pulled the door shut. The latch clicked into place, soft, final. On the other side, her footsteps faltered, then disappeared. And just like that, it was quiet again. Only this time, the quiet wasn't loneliness. It was freedom. I turned back toward the kitchen, poured myself another cup, and sat by the window. The rain had stopped. The air was still. And for the first time in years, I could hear my own thoughts again. Not hers. Not ours. Mine. If this story hit you in the chest, don't scroll just yet, drop a comment below. Have you ever held on too long to someone already gone? Like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear. Letting go doesn't mean losing, it might be the first step back to yourself.